Good morning, everyone. So we are going to delve into the topic of audio on Substack today. So as always, we're here to explore what a topic means to us and to our Substack. So I definitely have lots of experience to share with you, but the session is completely shaped by you. So feel free to ask in the chat box if you've got questions throughout, and that means that we can get to more and more questions. And I'll talk you through all the things I was going to talk you through first. We'll do some journaling and kind of delve into what we feel might work in terms of audio in our space. Some of us might be already using it, so we can see how we feel about that and kind of just have that hotline with our intuition, as I like to call it, journal it all out and see what's coming up for us. I did pick us some cards today because I feel like of all the topics that I talk about on Substack, I feel like for me, the journey with audio has been the most vulnerable, and there are lots of reasons for that. So if anybody else is feeling really vulnerable about this topic and really unsure and shaky, but like leaning in and curious, I thought it would be a good one to pick some cards for. So these are my artist friend Sarah Schott's Oracle cards. So we got Leap, which I love, is in a beautiful green color. We got Focus. We got Intrepid. A little adventure there. And Ground, which is such a lovely word, isn't it? I think when we're feeling kind of in the higher spaces and kind of anxious and dizzy, that invitation to ground is really, really important, and I think works well with this kind of invitation to audio. So that's those. Firstly, I want to mention this book, which I have talked about before on the Sparkle calls. So if anyone's not heard of Viv, so she's called Viv Groskop, and she wrote this book called How to Own the Room. And as part of my journey with trying to kind of understand my presentation style and why I had so many blocks around public speaking, I listened to a podcast with Viv and immediately bought a book. There are lots of really helpful exercises I'll just mute someone, hang on. I think that's all good. There are lots of really helpful exercises around owning your authentic voice and the room, as it were. So this relates to the physical room. It was written pre-pandemic, but I still think a lot of the lessons are really universal. So I would really, really recommend that book, and listening to Viv talk on public speaking, owning the room, all of that sort of space. So over on Substack, I've got you all on the screen, which is a total treat for me because usually I've got 2 pages and I'm trying to kind of keep a track on who's saying what. Over on Substack, could you just show me a hand if you're already using audio, just to get a sense of how to pitch it? Sarah, Ali, Audra, Andrea, great. So we've had a bit of an experiment. Thea, yeah, maybe. Evan saying I've used it once. Yeah, great. Okay, so we'll come into it. We're leaning in. It's possible. We're curious. I was having a conversation with a friend who also mentors me, actually, Lauren Barber. She's amazing. And she has a podcast that exists off Substack. And we were having this conversation about whether she should move it over to Substack. And we were talking about the person she was when she recorded it, which feels very different to the person she is now, but at the same time, it is an earlier version of who she is. And so for me, what I've learned in the process of just showing up and sharing some of my voice on Substack is that I have real compassion for that earlier version of myself that was just figuring it out, was kind of working out, is this something that I want to do? Are these topics that I want to talk about? I felt comfortable in the moment, but it's that dance with that vulnerability bit as well. So I'll talk you back through my journey with audio on Substack and where I've got to in the last kind of couple of years. And then we'll go into kind of exploring what you might want to do once you know a bit more of what's possible. So let me share my screen. Here we go. So this was my first adventure into audio on Substack. So this is on my publication, which is called Creatively Conscious, which was the very first publication that I started on Substack. So Creatively Conscious is an extension of my business. It's where I talk about my creative work, my project work. It's where I offer up the opportunity for guest posts. It's where I can be really inventive with what I want to do on Substack as an artist and a creative away from my Substack education space. So everything here tends to be quite experimental. I like to share a lot of real life. So our life on the Northumberland Coast and what is really going on behind the scenes, obviously to a point. Like, I don't share anything that I feel too personal or vulnerable about. But this podcast, the criteria that I set myself was that I would talk for 11 minutes about the themes of our beautiful reality. So for those of you that don't know, my husband's been sick since he contracted COVID in December 2020. So basically for the whole of my daughter's life. And there's an intensity to that. And there's also a leaning into kind of different emotions and acceptance within that as well. Like, we have a beautiful life here, but there is this ongoing struggle of kind of working something out that it feels quite lonely a lot of the time. So when I started this podcast, it was just to kind of talk about where I was finding beauty in that kind of drama, if you like. So just that mindfulness, the slowing down, what I could see in the garden, all that sort of stuff. So sorry, if you're not on mute, could you go on mute? Thank you so much. So there's
had a cough and cold for about 3 weeks now.
Oh, sorry. Hang on, let me just see if I can mute that.
And on Friday, I thought it was turning into tonsillitis, but it seems to have settled down a bit since yesterday.
I can't find who to mute.
I had tonsillitis at the end of January.
Sorry, someone's talking about tonsillitis, and I can't see who to mute.
Struggling to get over it, really.
Oh, it's Lou. Right, there we go. Sorry, Lou. Right, there we go. Right, back to this. Okay. So these short 11-minute voice notes, I did quite a lot of them, as you can see. There's a lot of my own photography in there. It feels like a really beautiful and positive snapshot of what was happening through the months. And then I stopped, I stopped here sort of July time last year. And then I've just put one in that was in response to Laura Oldfield's invite to transitions. So that was really, really lovely to do, just to kind of get back into it. And I gave myself that same criteria, so that 11-minute criteria, and I think I ended up talking for a little bit longer. So that's there. And then after that, we started a podcast here on Company of Two. So this was a joint podcast between myself and Laura Oldfield, my friend. And I just wanted to show you the back office of that. Let me just get back to that screen. So for those of you that haven't seen this before, this is what, I think somebody else has gone. I'm just having a whole load of, I'll have to change my Zoom settings. Oh, hang on, there we go. So this is the back office. When you start a podcast on Substack, this is what it gives you. So you can, from here, you can start a new episode. And then it's going to give you all your statistics as well around what the downloads are. So it's telling us we've had 1.6K downloads, and then how many in the first 7, 30 and 90 days. And you can do some kind of filters and stuff like that there. What's really interesting, and the reason that I'm showing you this space, is that it's quite a lot of listens. So it builds up over time. So with our Substack posts, we might do a post and it might get a bit of traction and we can share it again, you know, and a few people might click on it. With podcasts, they really build over time. So what we find is people will come to this podcast months and months after we've recorded it and say, this is exactly what I needed to hear today. Like, it was so brilliant to meet you both. And it feels like they're having a real conversation with Laura and I. So this podcast focus is on being business and balance in motherhood. So it's very niche. It's a very specific space. But the space itself, we call it a slow grow community. So we've got 255 subscribers, so relatively small, humble numbers, which would obviously love to be connected to all those people. It's not a paid space. And then here, obviously, this amount of downloads for that smaller number of people, that's what I want to get across to you, because it was the same on My Beautiful Reality. It's such a shock to me that Substack's growth engine is enabling this many downloads and this many people listening to us. And obviously people can be searching in other platforms as well. So it tells you at the bottom where people are listening. So we get that insight into which country they're listening from, and also the top players as well. So top is still Apple. Now we still need to set this up on Spotify, which you can do, but it's a bit of a faff. So we've not done it, but we will get round to it. And then, as you know, we'll have the Sparkle on Substack podcast. And my intention here was to do 12 episodes. It ended up being 14 just because of the fit of things and me responding in the moment to kind of different opportunities. I wanted some of them to be solo episodes and some of them to be guest episodes. And my intention with this whole space was just to explore, okay, what are my audio recording options? What are my audio editing options? How much time does it take? And what are the listens going to be like? What are the takeaways going to be for people? How possible is it going to be for people to listen? And so all of that has been a really huge learning curve for me, and I've really, really enjoyed it. It's been brilliant. So let me stop sharing for now. Okay. So that takes us up to where I am now. So I've just started recording season 2 of the podcast, and my intention for season 2 is that I want to outsource the editing, which I started doing towards the end of season 1. Well, I did it at the beginning of season 1, and then the person I'd worked with as a mentor had tried to mentor me to edit it, and I decided I didn't want to do it. So now I outsource the editing, and I am playing around with tech. So that's what I'll delve into next. So as you can see, I'm just using these Apple headphones today. These ones have the little inbuilt microphone here. So the sound quality is actually pretty good. And lots of podcasting friends of mine use these as well. So it's like you plug them in and off you go, and it's quite good. But also, every time I record podcasts, let me turn you around, I am in this space, which has a little soundproof board, and then there as well. So there could be more of these boards, but I'm basically in a corner of my room with some soundproof boards. So that just stops the echoing slightly. These are just from IKEA. We got them on the last kind of big trip, and I think actually could probably do with one more tall one would be quite good, and just make like a little cave. So anyone will tell you about audio, like you can record it in your cupboard. That's a really good place. Like if you can surround yourself by cushions just to kind of stop that noise echoing out. I've got this mic as well. So this is a Blue Yeti. I think they're just over £100. And I do sometimes use it. I think for me, I'd got nervous about whether it was going to work properly. So I needed to do some research and watch some YouTube channels to make sure that I understood that it was definitely recording. I didn't want to risk it with any of my guests because I didn't want to risk the having to like re-record or anything awkward like that. And then I'm going to get this off the desk. Oh, hang on, I'll just turn it around and show you. It's just one of these black what do you call it, sound bouncers. It's not called that at all. Don't type that into Amazon, but I'll find out what it's called. And my husband sets it all up, so that's that there. Now he also faffs around with mics outside of the house because he records in nature a lot, so he gets like other things like this, and I'll put these links in, but I don't know enough about them, so I'm not going to teach you those, but I will just put the links into the things that he uses outside the house. If he did want to record in nature, it just means that it's going to buff the wind out a little bit, so it's going to filter those windy noises of being outside, and the voice is really clear, and it means you can be further away from the camera or your phone as well, so you can kind of match the mic as like a clip-on mic, and then the camera or the phone's further away, so you've got options there. With the combination of video and audio, obviously you guys know with Sparkle I do both because I think it is really interesting for people to watch the conversation if they've got time. Like someone texted me and said that they'd put me on the telly, and I was like, oh, that is too much. Like I just hadn't ever thought about it like that. I just thought people might be, you know, watching on their desktop or something with it in the background, but no, people will put YouTube on the telly and watch the Sparkle call if I've got a guest, which is lovely. So thinking about how you can repurpose, and we'll do this in a future call, how you can repurpose audio when you use it. So if you've got a YouTube channel or you want to set one up, you can have it unlisted so it's not searchable, or you can have it that it's searchable. So obviously that can be part of your business ecosystem as well if you're interested in doing that. If you do that, we just record on Zoom. So I'm sure that's pretty obvious, but I know it wasn't to me when I first started understanding about podcasting. And the very first guest podcast I was on, she just turned up on Zoom without a camera on, and we just recorded the audio. So you always get the file choice of whether you want the video or the audio when you Zoom downloads, and you can use both or either, and they work really well. The other thing that you can do is record directly into Substack. Has anyone tried that? Show of hands. Yes, Elfin's nodding. Yeah, Ali has, Nelly as well. Yeah. I mean, I'd be interested to know from you guys in the chat how you found it. How have you found that, recording directly into Substack or reading posts aloud. Elfin's saying it was great. Really easy. Good. Good. Okay. If you haven't done your introductions yet, guys, feel free to pop in and do your introductions in the chat. We normally just say a bit about where we are in the world and then our Substack URL. So with the options on Substack, you can literally press the record button and just be talking into your laptop. So it'll go into the inbuilt laptop mic unless you've plugged in something like I have here. When you're reading a post aloud, it used to be that you had to open the post in a new window because the recording button kind of covered up some of the post. I don't know whether they've managed to change that yet because I've not done it in a while. But yeah, it is there as an option. And then there is a function where you can have AI read out your posts, or there was. I thought it had disappeared, but we're going to have a little search and see if it's back again today. So I think I've talked for long enough about audio. We're going to do a little bit of exploring and working out whether audio could be something that we're interested in for ourselves. Before I do that, obviously in the post yesterday, hopefully you managed to read that. There were a few different examples, and I'm going to share my screen and you can look at those again. But I also wanted to tell you about this piece that I just noticed at the weekend. So it's a post, actually, an interview with Emma Gannon. Obviously, it's very slick, very, very interesting read. And then as you're getting down, look at this. So there's a little piece of audio here. It's 2 minutes long, on the nose, and I have listened to it. It's really, really worth listening. Obviously, Emma is very equipped and good at podcasting and putting down what she wants to say. And that's what this is. But it just added that other dynamic to the post. So it's a little bit of a pitch about who she is and what she does for new readers. But there was also something really lovely for me in there, having like met her and heard her speak to kind of reconnect to her voice and what she wanted to say on this particular topic. And I really enjoyed just that being in the middle of a post. I've not seen that before. I have seen people do like voice notes from a walk and put those in a post. I'll see if I can find that example for you. But yeah, that was a really, really lovely one to share with you, just something different. Right, so let's get our post up from yesterday. The Ringtons man's downstairs. We've got this thing in the northeast where this man comes with a basket of tea and coffee and biscuits every other Monday. I can hear him. I don't know whether my husband's going to get anything or not. Right, where did I say it here? There we go. So the 4 ways that I gave you, obviously this was very simplistic because I just wanted to get across that there are different options with Substack. So obviously pressing the headphones button in a post and uploading something from the computer. So that could be anything, like that could be a recording of your day, that could be you speaking on a walk, that could be a podcast you've pre-recorded somewhere. And then you can read your post aloud. So that would be a post that you've written that you can then just read through. Starting a podcast, it's less scary than it sounds, and we're going to break it down a little bit. If anyone is interested in that, we're going to talk about it, and then insert a Spotify playlist. With the Spotify playlist, I just wanted to say that again, when we're building community on Substack, this is just another beautiful way to say, I've made this playlist for you. I was thinking of you guys and our connection or whatever it is. This is actually a really old one that I made that's got like a couple of songs that mean a lot to me on. And so I did question, like, am I sharing this? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to share that. Like, why wouldn't I? That's such a beautiful thing. So I've never done it before. I've seen other people do it. I think it works well. So that's it there. So thinking about you and what you want to do with your Substack, I want you to head over to your Substack, have a look from your website and see if there was any natural place where you would like to add an audio, where you could add an audio. So it could be a post that you're particularly proud of that you could add an audio, you could read it out and add that in. It could be a post that you're proud of and you want to just add a snippet of something. It could be you've written a post and you feel like it's got more mileage to turn into like a mini podcast series. There are so many ways with this, but head over to your Substack, have a little look, see if there's any flashes of inspiration, and then come over and pop them on the chat. Okay, keep going, but we've had a few chats coming in, so I'm just going to keep the call moving and read those out. Oh, so Lou, yes, Lou. So we're doing some journaling. We're looking at our Substack and we're questioning, are there any places currently that we could have added audio, or is there anything that we've written that we think could have more mileage to become a podcast series, a mini series of audio? Is there anything in that? So we're just looking at our own Substacks and coming back to the chat. Okay. So Joe is saying, part of my Substack is about grief. I've added a podcast for a couple of the posts I did last year. I'm now thinking about trying to add it elsewhere, like the post I'm doing today. Yeah, so some of it is a capacity thing for sure. So if you're going to spend the time reading out the audio, you might have to do a couple of takes of that. You know, if you don't get it perfect, you know, first time, you might want to do a couple of takes. You might want to give yourself some space and time. Where we're going to go next is where we feel like audio enhances our publication and our own personal barriers to recording audio. So we'll go in next there in journaling. So some more might come up for Joe in that. So Andrea says, I thought about embedding snippets of my interviews in the Coach House Conversations post, but I need to agree this with interviewees. I always record my interviews, so I've thought about adding the entire audio, but I think it would need to be edited, and I'm not confident with that yet, a skill to learn. Yeah, so my process was, I thought I was going to do that because I don't edit any of the conversation. All I do is put an intro and an outro, both the music and a talking piece at the start and the finish. So I always say to my guests, I'm not going to edit any of it. It's all going in, partly because there's something in the natural flow of conversation that I really like, especially when you're watching on YouTube. And I'm really sensitive when I listen to other people's podcasts where I'm like, oh, it feels like they've jumped ahead. And so I'm still learning, but at the minute, I just want to be able to record in that way, not only because it's more time efficient, because it's not going to take a ton of edits, but also I wouldn't be confident enough to know that needs to come out because it all feels really valuable to me. And so it feels like I want to share that with you all. So that's what my process is. With that editing, I use GarageBand on the Apple Mac, and my friend and consultant taught me how to do it, but it's not very intuitive. So what I found was that I was re-Googling things that she taught me. We had like 3-hour-long sessions and I was still like re-Googling things that she'd already taught me. We should have recorded those calls really. And then I found myself, I wasn't really enjoying the editing process, and there's so much more that I want to do, you know, in life and with my work. So I was like, I'll just outsource it. So now somebody does that for me and that feels really good. If you feel like you would enjoy it and you have time, there are so many different programs to use. So Audacity is the one that Laura Oldfield recommends. She really likes that one. And like I said, GarageBand was like, okay, but not very intuitive. So for me, yeah, I guess I would give it a 5 out of 10. So it's definitely something to think about. Okay, so Jen says, I use a lot of audio in my work for guided active imaginations to support people to connect with the mythic imagination, their creativity. I'm just moving my mailing list to Substack, exciting, this week, and plan on using audio for this purpose. Yeah, so that point of connection, that deeper connection of somebody hearing the way that you want something to be expressed, which we can conversationally we can get across in writing, but it's just another level, isn't it? It's another level of connection and a deeper connection. Sarah says, the posts that get the most interaction are my deep dives into self-belief lessons, and I think they'd be great with audio. Could definitely mini series them. How would I separate by section? Yeah, so it depends, Sarah. If you want to embed the audio as part of the post, that's totally possible, and you would just press the headphone button in the post to do that. If you wanted to start a podcast within Substack, you don't have to pull that through as an RSS feed anywhere else, but I did set myself up on Apple for Sparkle on Substack. For the Creatively Conscious one, there's no RSS feed. It's called a podcast, but it's not really. It's just a series of voice notes, really. And I think if I did that again, I would set that up as a section. But as it was, I was kind of experimenting and thought, yeah, let's just put that there for now. And it might be that that's still right. And later on, you know, further down the line, I might end up adding more into that and it might end up as an RSS feed, but I don't think so because it feels pretty personal and like it's like a letter, really. It's like a letter to my subscribers. So some of it's around how you want it distributed and some of it's around how you want to organize your Substack, I guess is what I'm saying. Nellie says, I like to do audio recordings of poetry, my own, and also reading out poems I share. Gorgeous. I need to head over and listen to some of those. I'm definitely more of a reader than a listener just because I'm around the kids so much and I don't have noise when I'm working. So it's like very small audio windows. So Joe's saying I've found people listen to my podcast on my Substack 6 months later. Yeah, it's wild. So on that Creatively Conscious one, I think I've got just over 2,000 subscribers on Creatively Conscious, but the podcast has had 2,600 downloads. It's just wild. It's amazing. Lou says, I definitely feel I could record and noodle around topics I've covered lately, resilience, for example, and I've got a post coming up on values. I've also done Lou Reed's post on a book I read that informs my work, and I could revisit that and read out what I've written or do a more extended thinking piece on it. Yeah, I think with anything like that, we can just be experimental and then look at the statistics and look at the warmth. If we do get regular comments, and we don't all, because lots of people still read an email, but if we do get regular comments, we'd be looking at the warmth of those comments and like trying to sort of ascertain where things were landing. Okay, one more. So Elfin says, I'd add in audio to one of my posts because it's poetic. It's a post that captures the core message of my Substack. Right, so a really strong post, very short, and I wouldn't be hard to do it at all. It got many likes as well. That sounds really sensible. And then you could share that to notes and say, this post landed with a lot of you and I've decided to embed an audio. So here it is or something. And then you'll get another set of people coming over to have a look at that. So let's do some more journaling and I'll go through some more of the chat while we're doing that. We're going to think about the familiarity of what the medium of audio can bring to our subscribers. So we're going to go into that connection and literally just start at the top of your page with the word audio connection. You know, just get that audio connection. And then on the other side of the page, my personal barriers to audio. So it might be, haven't got the time to edit, don't feel confident in my voice, wouldn't know where to start, don't know what to say, and just list everything out without judgment. You're allowed all of your thoughts and feelings. It's all good. And then we're going to come back together and see whether we can find the balance between those two spaces. So I'm going to put this in the chat. Lots of people ask me to do that to make sure it's really clear. So on the left side, you're talking about the depth of connection possible with audio, your beliefs and thoughts around it. On the right side, oh, sorry, guys, something happened there. On the right side, barriers to I've totally got thrown there. That was so weird. You're all back though, it's good. Barriers to my personal relationship with audio. Right, let me put that in the chat. Sorry about that. Okay, so left side. Okay, guys, so I'll bring us back together so we can keep moving on. But hopefully you've had a bit of time to connect with those questions. I feel like for this, it's going to be different for us all. So I'd love to hear from any of you. If anybody wants to talk, you're super welcome. It is an audio call after all. If not, then write it in the chat and I'll read them out. That's absolutely fine. But I just wondered, yeah, if we started with the toughest bit, actually, the barriers. So what you were listing out on the right-hand side, what sort of stuff was coming up for you around barriers to creating audio on Substack? I'll read Elfin's because she's put it here, but if anybody, oh, Joe's going to talk. Hi, Joe.
Hello. The one that everybody's mentioned is the editing, because I live with dogs and I have creaky chairs and traffic outside. But then sometimes I think actually that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes we can over edit. And also I worry about my voice and the time it takes. So I think it's probably the same for a lot of the barriers, I think are probably the same for us.
Similar. And do you feel like there's anything from the connection side that helps you feel more easeful around the dogs and the creaky floorboards and the traffic outside?
I think so. And the other thing I'd like to say is because my podcast is aimed at older people. I mean, it's anybody can read it, but I think actually audio is a good thing because a lot of people with it would allow people with sight problems to actually listen rather than struggling with looking at a screen. So I think that, but yes, I think in some ways it's me. I mean, people know it's me. I'm chaotic and, so yes, I think the noises are not necessarily a bad thing. I think you're right. I think they are a connection.
It's
I'm
the
not
atmosphere, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm not a professional sound recordist. I mean, I've got a proper microphone, one of the round ones. But yeah, no, I agree. I think the connection, I think some of the sounds, as long as it doesn't detract from what you're saying,
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree, especially on Substack, because we're building community. And the way to build community is to be less perfected and squeaky clean and more real. That's because otherwise, how's it relatable? Like my Zoom went off, I told you purposefully that the ringtone span was downstairs. That's not information that you need to know, but it's what I'm hearing and listening into at the same time as speaking to you. And so there is some sort of sweet spot with all of this. Like, yes, we can go to a podcast studio or we can make our homes as podcast friendly as possible so that it's not distracting. But the main thing that would be distracting is if you can't hear properly. So if it's going to obviously be a complete barrier and the dogs are barking over you talking, that would be a barrier. But mostly it's atmospheric. So you've got to kind of work out how that environment could fit for you and where would be the best time to kind of record from and how that all works. In terms of the edits, I had put a note in about budget to talk about today, and I'll be really happy to be open about what I've spent so far on my podcast, which has felt both professional development for me, but also because I feel it's really, really important that I have a podcast as part of Sparkle on Substack. So it's a business investment as well, in the hope that it reaches more people. Like that is my hope. But with the editing, usually what I've found, and when I was doing some research around this, is that people will say, okay, well, it's at least an hour of my time, because obviously you can't really work in kind of shorts, however long it takes, it's at least an hour, it might be longer. So if you're asking them to edit the conversation, that's going to take longer. If you're asking them to clean up the audio, which is something that they can do, and it's really incredible what people can do with cleaning up the audio and removing background noises and distracting things. Even if audio is quite damaged, they can still do something with it. So that's more expensive. You're paying for someone's time. So I think, I've had everything from sort of £15 an hour to £30 an hour. Obviously, the people that do it professionally, and I'm sure they're much more expensive than that. So these tend to be people who are doing it as a bit of a side hustle that I've been in touch with. I'd be really happy to pass anybody's details on if anybody wants that. That's absolutely fine. I'm really happy to do that. If the best thing to do with that is either direct message me on Instagram. You can on Instagram as well, on Substack, or send me an email and I can pass on some details. And then in terms of the professional mic setup, I already had the mic. I've had it for years. It's part of my kind of toolkit, if you like. And the graphics I do myself. And Laura and I did our graphics ourselves as well. And then it's your time, isn't it? So it's how you build that into your content calendar and your time for what you think you want to do on Substack. I guess the point of me positioning this call here and now is that I think it is a really valuable time to be building audio into your creative practice. And that's why I was really clear that come if you're curious, and we'll try and work through some of those barriers. Right, so let's see if anybody else has popped some bits and bobs in here. I put a little quote in for you to read. So Sophie Roberts is saying, left side for me, opportunity for people to feel closer to me like they do in my face-to-face workshops, more inclusive, accessible for different audiences. Right side for me would be how to do it, being the technical side, concern about criticism, people not wanting to work with me because I'm not big enough. Oh, do you know, I've heard that last bit like so many times, and I'm like, it's just so interesting, isn't it? Because I think I definitely had those sorts of feelings earlier in my career, like who would I reach out to and why? But honestly, like when I started Sparkle, which was only last July, everybody I reached out to podcast with said yes. Like everybody, and they have bigger online profiles than me. I was just really interested to talk to them about Substack, and people were like, yes, please, sounds lovely. And I didn't have a relationship with a lot of them beforehand either. So yeah, I think sometimes podcasts are really positive PR for people, and people like to do them. So if they've got capacity, they will say yes. And I think there's this line that we dance, isn't there, around who we are in the world and how we value our work, and then what the numerical stuff says. And it's like, I mean, is it important? I don't know. I think if we're just doing our work in the world, if we're just feeling guided to show up the way that we want to show up, it doesn't really matter about numbers. It's like, if it's important to people, that's fair enough. But to me, everybody's got something important to say. Like everybody is a valid human in the world and a creative human. So yes, sorry, tangent. So what I think I want to do is do that in the next workshop. So like literally walk you all through the process, because I wasn't sure how much of you needed that, but I think that's what we're going to do. The opportunity for people to feel closer, for sure. And so there's something where people are like curious, you know, we watch Instagram stories, we watch YouTube, we like to listen. And the accessibility piece is really, really important. So this is why I use YouTube video and not Substack video, because Substack video doesn't have captions and YouTube does. And on that, I always add a transcript as well, because I just think we've got the opportunity to be accessible and it's very quick and easy to do. So we should always aim to do that. That said, I did have a comment from somebody who really struggles with audio because of some hearing damage. So there's always that side of it as well. So if we can be as accessible as we possibly can using the tools that we've got, I think that is the best that we can do. So tips on finding music to add to the background of an audio. Yes, interesting. So I asked a composer friend and she said yes. So I agreed like a payment, so that's budget as well. So I agreed a payment, which was like a forever license to use that on Sparkle, and paid her for some consultancy time as well. So that's how I worked that out. But I do think there'll be a more straightforward answer than what I did. So I'll find out for you, Chelsea. Yeah, okay. So I'll just have a quick scan of these and see if there's a barrier. Is time for the writing. I'm concerned audio will be another rabbit hole. I'll fall down. About 2 people will listen, one being my mum. Yeah. So my experience has been more people have listened and different people have listened. And then it's acted as a funnel into my work. So people feel more connected to me. I don't put video in front of the paywall on Substack anywhere. So the only people that meet me on video are paid subscribers and members. So I think with audio, I feel comfortable to do audio. So that's what I do. Maybe one day I'll feel comfortable to do video, but I don't know. I like the thought that it is building up over time, that people are reading our posts over time and getting to know us, that people could listen to a snippet of audio and get to know us. So it's all deepening that connection. Great. I just want to jump into scripts a little bit and then I'll go into these. So we're going to do some journaling on scripts. What I want you to do, so everyone will need to be on mute for this, is I want you to go to your favorite Substack post. So if you don't have a favorite, you should have a favorite, because sometimes when it's Substack reads, they ask, for nominations. So you should be able to say to each other, in my chat or anywhere, if you're in touch with each other, could you nominate this for me? I'm really proud of it. Go to your favorite Substack post, or just one you've done recently if you don't have a favorite yet, and just read some of it out. So in your voice, read it out, and then make some notes on whether you think that would make a good audio script. So the idea is that we're playing with this transition between what we've written and how we would speak it. So you'll get this quite intuitively. You'll know whether you want to add more detail, or whether you say a lot or a lot, like I do. So you'll just get a sense of what your speaking voice does to enhance your written voice, or to look at it the other way on, what you strip out from your speaking voice. So I would always say my written voice is more sophisticated and educated than my speaking voice. I'm being quite harsh there, but you know what I mean? It's like I can have more time and space to think things through, but actually I probably, when I'm reading it, probably try and add a joke in or something. I don't know, try and be funny. So see what comes up for you. We'll take about 5 minutes to do that. Does it make sense? I'll put it in the chat. Okay, so some people are starting to have to go, so I'll keep us on track because there's one more thing that I want to show you. What did that bring up for you? Put it in the chat while I'm showing you the next thing. I just think it's so insightful because you're sort of tripping over your own words. You know you've written them and that's your written voice, but there's this kind of disconnect between how you want to read it out and what else you might want to say. And there's some storytelling to sort of lean into on that as well. So sometimes we might shrink ourselves down and think, oh, well, I'll just say that much of it, or it's getting too long now. I've had the message from Substack that it's too long for email, or I don't want it to be X number of words. But other times when we speak it out and write it out bigger, we can strip back from that. So I just think it's super interesting exercise to do. Let me know how it's all gone. Right, I'm just going to share my screen again, show you something else before we finish. So this is something called Cast Magic, which is AI software. So this is my recent podcast with Molly from Hippie Highland Living. And what happens here is it separates out the speakers. So there's a whole transcript, which is what Substack can do as well for free, but this is paid software. So that all goes on and you can see it like that. And then you can have this AI content where it's going to give you some suggested titles for your podcast. It's going to give you the keywords. Obviously super useful if you're leaning into putting it on your website with SEO and stuff. It's even got Molly's bio. Now, I've not given them that. That is just from our conversation. So this is everything they've gleaned from the conversation and put into a bio. This is a suggested introduction that it's saying, Claire, you could read this. Hello and welcome to another sparkling episode of Sparkle on Substack. I mean, it's funny, but it's very good. It gives you the time-stamped overview, which I do use. You'll have seen this in my podcast posts. It gives us some follow-up questions. It gives us some key topics and bullets. It gives you some clip finders, so really strong quotes, and I use this all the time. So I usually lead with one of these strong quotes in my post. It gives you a script for Instagram Reels, a LinkedIn post. I have used these LinkedIn posts. I do edit them slightly. A newsletter, huge, big, long newsletter, tweet thread, and then threads by Instagram, which I've never, ever been on, but it's there. What you can do with this is you can modify it to make it longer, make it shorter, make it more casual, make it more serious. So those are really interesting tools. I wouldn't have paid for this if it wasn't going to save me a lot of time. And the reason that it saves me time is because I don't have to re-listen to the podcast and pull out quotes. I would have to do that. I would have to re-listen, see which quotes were going to be the strongest for the article, and then go back and word for word make sure that I had them correct, either from the Substack transcript or from just listening. And then obviously the time-stamped overview is really handy as well, because I know sometimes people want to get to like the thing that I've said. I've not used the intros yet, but that is just I don't want to call it lazy podcasting, but it is because I am terrified of doing a good enough job of introing someone. And I feel like at the moment, I do an intro about the podcast and I let the person introduce themselves and talk a little bit about how we know each other. And then we're straight in. But I do want to do this. I do feel like I need some coaching support around this, though, introducing what the conversation is in a really succinct way and introducing who the person is in the world. I just think I need more around that. So, but that's really just one piece of software that I just wanted to show you that exists in the world. You can also do a few other things, like they've just added in this studio thing, so you can get like some tiles and stuff for Instagram with like little quotes and stuff like that. So it's quite good. Okay. The bit that I mentioned about Substack's transcription is that when you put something in as a podcast and only as a podcast, this doesn't work for audio in posts, it has to be a podcast. You then get a button that says run transcript. When you run the transcript, you then get a URL to add that back into the post. So I add it back in as a URL because if people are on the app, it doesn't open on the app. They'd have to be on the desktop. So if you are going to do that for accessibility purposes, obviously it's great, but also people really like transcripts and they might read your work rather than listen to it. So The comments have been really insightful about that. Great. Let's see what you found out when you were reading bits and bobs. So Thea said, oh my goodness, I need to practice to read out my article. It's so different from just speaking, teaching or chatting or doing a meditation. Yeah, it's so different, isn't it? There's so much to it. So Lou says, loved that. Not so good at reading out a script, but I loved using the post as a sounding board. I'm definitely not that fluid in reading aloud, but I definitely warmed up. There's probably a case for some pre-recording warm-up exercises. Yeah, so what I found is when I read some of my Substack posts, like early in my journey, it would be the second recording. So I would do the first one and figure out how I read it and what I wanted to add in. And then I would do a second recording. So it didn't take that long to do. It doesn't take that long to read out a post. It's relatively short, but yeah, a second recording's good. Done this a couple of my posts, surprised myself. I enjoy reading and recording them. I kept them pretty word for word. I use SoundLab to record them. Oh, great. So that's some other recommendations on tech. So Joe said, realize the posts are good for audio, less serious. Grief posts, which I plan as a podcast, more serious, tend to have references which are difficult to read out. Yeah. And so there's a writer called Jessica Rose Williams, and she's done some reading of her newsletters, and sometimes she does cover really personal and vulnerable topics. I find them a really hard read, but I read really hard listen, but I do read them. So I think sometimes the sensitivity of topics, like we have to be really careful, don't we? Because it's that bigger personal connection, but that can be triggering. So I think if any of our work has a potential trigger in it, we'll have to say that from the off, like right at the top, you know, we've got a sense of responsibility there. So Ali says, I've been really pragmatic and just speak out loud what I've written. It helps me get over the fear of getting it wrong, but I'm a bit worried it might sound a bit wooden. Early days, I think folk are conversational, have confidence. Yeah, there's just so much in it, isn't there? It's like, I really feel like it's just a sliding scale of experimentation. Like when I did Laura's SoundCloud challenge, I honestly wasn't going to send it out. Like I recorded it and scheduled it for a week in the future. And then as the date was nearing, I was like, I'm going to just tell her I don't want to do it. Like I'm going to pull it down. And I re-listened to it and I decided that I wasn't going to send it out, but I was going to post it to Substack. So there is always that option, isn't there? There's like a different level of comfort with how you feel, like how exposing it feels or what you've talked about, or maybe in your mind, you think you've been, you know, more personal than you're meant to be, and you listen again and you think, no, it's fine. Actually, these are universal themes and this is really helpful. And I'm not saying that this is at all connected because it's really hard to know, but the next email that I sent out on Creatively Conscious, I got 3 new members, and that was just a written post. So it could have had that knock-on effect, you know, you don't know. So I do think it makes people more close to us and more familiar. Okay, great. So we're gonna close audio, but I am going to do an audio tutorial because I really wanted to see how this was all going and what was coming up for you all before I planned the second workshop on this. So I'm going to do a proper, okay, this is how we do it all, and we'll go into like how we can prepare as well and look around that. Are there any questions around audio? Does anyone want to come on and talk? Anything Substack related? Anything that you feel stuck with? Anything that you want support and advice on? Feel free to use the chat to collaborate as well. Natalie, hi.
Hello.
Oh.
So I'm stuck because I don't fully understand the difference between a Substack audio and a podcast. And if I already have a podcast on a podcast platform, I don't know how to get it into Substack without then having 2 sets of data tracking listeners.
So podcast, Substack is the podcast host. So the podcast then, when you move it, is hosted on Substack. So wherever it's hosted now, my understanding is, and I've not done this, you would stop hosting it there and allow Substack to be the podcast host.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It
So,
does.
so you'll probably be paying for hosting somewhere, are you?
Yeah.
So it's free to host on Substack. So worth
Right.
it for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, you would take that down. So that is no longer hosting your Substack, and then you would embed it in Substack. Probably do that one first, make sure it all works okay. Again, there's been a couple of shout outs with people asking for support on this. So I think, again, I might be able to help or have some more advice, or have somebody that's done it that can kind of support you guys, because it's a bit nerve-wracking, isn't it? But with everything that Substack do, I've been quite surprised at how seamless it's been and how good the tech is. So hopefully this is the same and it all works okay.
Yeah, my worry is just because I've got about 10,500 downloads on it. It'd be a real shame to go back to zero.
Right, yeah. And so
Okay.
I guess then, I guess how that works then when Substack pick up the hosting, let's do a note about it. Will you DM me, Natalie, so I don't forget? We'll do a note about it. I'm going to tag a few people in who I think will have some intel on this, and we'll just try and get to the bottom of it, because nobody can take those downloads away from you. Those have happened. So in terms of your bio, you've got them. That's all good. But how it will then appear in the back office of Substack, I don't know. So let's ask that question.
Thank you.
Was there another bit to that, sorry, before, or not? Was that everything?
Oh, it was just, so one of the things I wanted to do with the audio is just have an audio version of my posts.
Yeah.
So separate to the podcast. But am I right that those are two different things? That there's Substack audio and Substack podcasting?
Yeah. So you set your podcast up on Substack, or you can embed audio into a post. When you go onto your post, like write post, and then you click the little headphones in the toolbar, you'll get two options, one to upload audio or one to record audio. So that isn't going anywhere on any podcasts. That's just within the post.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, Natalie, I think there was another Natalie Lou, that was going to speak, and we had two Natalies going to speak at the same time. Did you want to say something, Nat?
Oh, I think I just assumed you were talking. I hadn't even realised there was another Natalie. No worries.
No, these Zoom rooms.
It was just a quick question. So I don't have an issue. I mean, I had a long-running podcast for ages up until last year, and then I stopped that. So I don't have a problem with the recording or any of that stuff. But I think I had not kind of considered having a podcast on Substack, because I'd already just left behind a podcast. But then I noticed that people put their, what did you just call them, like the embedded audio post into that it goes out on the podcast. Like I got Sarah Faye's audio of her class from the weekend, and I think I got maybe I got a voice note from you as well that I think turned up in my feed the other day as well. So what I wanted to know was, I went now to have a look about setting up the podcast in Substack, but does the podcast differentiate between audio that went out to everybody or audio that only went to paid subscribers? Does that make sense?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, for sure. So what I have done with my podcast on Sparkle is a couple of different things. I'll either send you guys the YouTube unlisted so nobody else can get that, or I'll set it up as a paid podcast, so only paid subscribers can listen to it for a couple of weeks, and then I'll release it to everybody. So you can choose. You can either have it as paid permanently, or you can have it as paid, but then you take the paywall off. So that was something that I just wanted to try specifically for my workshop with Cat River, because we'd said that we would do it that way around, and it really fitted with what she was doing over on her platform. So yeah, it's totally possible. You can have a podcast that is solely for paid subscribers and set that up when you're setting up your podcast. It's actually really easy to set up a podcast like it is to set up a section. So you've got all of the opportunities, really. I think you might be able to have a preview the same way you can on Substack video. We didn't cover it in the class, but when you record Substack video, so outside of YouTube, you can have an RSS feed that feeds your podcast. So I did that as an experiment, which I wrote to you all about. It was recorded as a video, but I sent that out as a podcast as well. And it is on Apple Podcasts, even though it went out as a Substack video. I hope I'm not confusing anyone. I'm unraveling that because it still is quite bonkers to me. But yeah, it's all about ticking that RSS button and where you put the paywall. Those are the two options that we've got.
So so you're saying that you put it out like for, is there a setting, like you're saying you put it out for like a couple of weeks and then and then you let it become available to the public. Is there a setting that does it automatically, or is that something that has to be managed manually?
So I just changed it. The only setting that's available in Substack settings is for you to paywall posts after a time. So you could say, okay, after 2 weeks, paywall everything. After 3 weeks, after 2 months, you know, you could do it that way around, but you can't do it the other way around where you would make something open source where it's been paid. You've got to just pop in and do it manually. So you just go on the 3 little dots and then edit post. And then obviously when you go through to the publish page again, it just gives you that option. You just tick free subscribers and then update. So it doesn't send it to everybody again. It just updates it.
Oh, I see. And then I guess it would go into the feed then.
Yeah, so it wouldn't, because you're not sending it out again. I mean, you can send it out again. I didn't, because I'm always really mindful of how many emails I'm already sending to people. But at that point, no. So that's why I would like then link it again. So it's all around, you know, the strategy for me is trying to hold everybody in the membership as the people that I have the deepest connection with and the people that I'm supporting and helping the most. So that's my decision making around it. And because people can, it'll pop up in Apple Podcasts as a new podcast. It sort of feels like, well, that's where most people are listening, so they'll get it anyway. So it's just that email fatigue, isn't it? Sometimes, like, it's always useful to, like, you know, however many people, but then there are the other people that are like, not another email. What do I have to do with this one? You know? So yeah, you can be discerning around all that.
I thought I should just add, Sarah Fay, I spoke to her like a couple of weeks ago. And I didn't know that there was a difference between embed and the voice over option. So if you choose the embed option, you know, if you're in the app and you can press play at the top, it won't link that recording to the embed one. It only does that if you do a voiceover. Because I was a bit baffled as to why I was hearing like an AI voice. Or I don't know.
Okay, yeah. So it is still there, the AI thing, right?
Yeah. So if you want, like anybody who is reading it in the app or wants to listen to it in the app, to have the option of just press and play at the top of the post, you have to upload the audio as a voiceover, not as an embed, which up until I spoke to Sarah 2 weeks ago, I was always doing it as an audio embed.
Were you? Okay, so that's when it's further down the post, you know, when I showed that example of Emma's guest post. So so you don't, so you that is set up as a post, so then it's only when you scroll down. It's like if you do an Instagram embed, if you've ever seen an Instagram embed, it's only going to hit somebody when it gets to that point. So that makes sense. Thanks for that. Yeah, because I think there's just that nuance, isn't it, of how people are using the app. And I think it's really good to know, because if people can see at a glance that they can press a play button, that might be a better option. Whereas if they think it's just a post, they think, well, I'll read that later with a cup of tea. So it's good to know, isn't it, that's
and it's also because if you do the audio embed and the audio is for paid subscribers, what I discovered is I was then getting a message from a paid subscriber going, is there any way for the audio to be at the top of the post? Because if I'm playing it and I want to pause it, I have to scroll down, because obviously if it's paid, then it's below the paywall bit. And I was like, I don't know, like Substack, just being like Substack. And then it turns out like the whole audio embed thing kind of takes care. Like basically, if you're a paid subscriber and there's an audio embed, then they will get it. And if you're not a paid subscriber, then it will not have the option to press play. Or it will say something like, to listen to this audio, you need to upgrade.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think in the way that we're starting to use and consume Substack, there's something in that, isn't there? Because like with Emma's embed, it was short, and it's that invitation to listen to something short. And then if you were putting in a little voice note or something, like I've always thought of embeds as that sort of style, but I didn't realize that people were like embedding like the whole thing. So I think it sounds better, doesn't it? The way that you and Sarah Fay have worked it out. That sounds a better way for people who are using the app.
Yeah, I think it's just that Substack, in the way that they are, was a little grey area.
For sure.
It's not immediately obvious what the difference is between a voiceover or an embed, or what that technically means in terms of how it's going to turn up in the email.
Super helpful.
On the app.
I'll update my post on that as well, Nat. That's so helpful. Thank you. Okay, so we got just another few minutes if anybody wants to ask any questions. I'm just going to check the chat. Is anybody? Oh, okay. So, oh, okay, that's fine. Oh, so Thea's saying, is there a case for just doing audio on Substack? I have a friend who doesn't want to write much but loves audio. Yeah, for sure. But why not? You know, this is the thing, you know, so this hangover from it being a platform for writers, like that's done now, that's finished. They were a platform for writers, and then they, you know, went through an evolution, and now they're a platform for creatives who also write. Like that's it, you know. So there might be videographers on there, there might be audio artists, there might be visual artists. Like we don't have to box ourselves into writing. You know, yes, it's available and we can post and that's all great, but no, there's so much growth available to us if we're more creative with the platform, which is my personal passion, you know. So yeah, for sure they can do that. So Sophie's saying, is there a way to put things on our Substacks that people can download like PDFs? Yes. So if you make a PDF, you drag it from your desktop into your post, it'll magically appear. It's like the best thing ever. Like I was Googling around this for ages when I first did it, and then literally it's drag and drop and it's in. So that's what to do. Okay, I am going to let you lovely people get on with your day. I'm going to stop recording.